بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأفضل الصلاة وأزكى السلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. Peace be upon you, dear respected viewers, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome once again to this program where we discuss certain matters in each presentation concerning this holy month of Ramadan and how we could benefit from the holy month of Ramadan in the best ways possible. In our last episode, we spoke about 3 things which the human being can use in order to satisfy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with and also achieve the best results during this holy month of Ramadan. And inshallah, in today's presentation, I shall be speaking about a certain practice which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is satisfied with. And it is a conduct and a form of ethics which the human being can use in order to reach success and exit this month of Ramadan as a successful Muslim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Holy Quran, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Translation of this verse is, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and have piety as much as possible. Obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of these, submission and fear, they are madahir from the appearances of a muttaqi, someone with taqwa, someone with piety. Therefore, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have piety in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as much as you are able to, as much as possible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us in this holy month of Ramadan to reach the highest level of worship through the highest level of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, with the highest level of submission to Allah, along with the highest level of worship, we reach the highest level of piety and taqwa. The best type of worship in this holy month of Ramadan, the best type of worship is the hardest type of worship. Ashaddul ibadah. The hardest and the most severest type of worship is the one which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is satisfied with and satisfied by. Now, many people come and interpret this meaning. What is the hardest type of worship? And what does this mean that one worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala severely? The human being, with his abilities and shortcomings, in the holy month of Ramadan pressures himself. What is the type of pressure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from the human being? And what do the hadith state? According to many scholars, the severest type of worship and the hardest type of worship has been interpreted in several meanings. Some people state, some scholars state that the hardest type of worship which is meant in the hadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhum salam, Ashaddul ibadah, is Salatul Layl. We know that Salatul Layl can be performed after Salatul Isha up until Salatul Fajr, just before Salatul Fajr. And the closer it gets to the adhan of Fajr Salat, the more reward it brings upon the person performing it. However, is this really it? Because we know those who are muttaqeen, those who are close to Sahibul Asr wal Zaman, are known for their qiyamul layl, for them standing at night in worship, spending their night hours in worship. Those who are close to Sahibul Asr wal Zaman, Ajjal Allah Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, are people who perform qiyamul layl, who are standing at night in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salatul Layl is one of their characteristics and specifications. Therefore, is it really Salatul Layl? Other ulama come and state that no, it's not only Salatul Layl. This matter, Ashaddul ibadah, also includes the nawafil which are performed in between salat. We have in Mafatih al-Jinan and other books which teach us the mustahabbat. People stand up and perform mustahabbat known as nawafil. They perform their salat, they recite the taqibat of salat. And many people believe that this is the hard type of worship. Why? Because on top of what you have obligatory upon you, what is wajib and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires from you, on top of that you are pressuring yourself in order to satisfy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even more by performing mustahab acts. Other scholars, however, come and state that no, it's not really the Salatul Layl or any type of worship which we have mentioned, nawafil and so on. But what is known as Ashaddul Ibadah, the hardest type of worship, which in fact is Afdalul Ibadah, the best type of worship, the most severest type of worship, they come and interpret this by saying that this refers to Hajj. Because as we know in the past, Hajj, going to Hajj, performing Hajj wasn't like it is today. Many people today, you find them not really understanding the meaning behind going to Mecca. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed His home in the most hardest places reachable by a human being. Meaning that it was placed in a place with no grass, full of mountains. It is hard for the camel to go on. It is hard for the horse to walk through. And it is a place where its weather is not comfortable for the human being. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has poured His test upon every human being, beginning with the obligation of going to Hajj when you are able to, meaning as soon as you have the funds to, as soon as you have the markab, as soon as you have a car, as soon as you have a vehicle, as soon as you have a horse, as soon as you have something accessible to you which is able to take you to Hajj, as soon as you have the food which is sufficient for you to go to Hajj, as soon as you have the money, this becomes wajib around your neck. You have to offer it. Starting from this, therefore you find that the seriousness of this obligation is something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not take easily. The beginning of its wajib is something difficult. Now this is also one of the pillars of Islam, offering Hajj liman istata' to whoever is able. Therefore if you are able, you have to go through this hard process. Through this hard process, you have to go through the tawaf. Tawaf, many people die in this tawaf. Many people come back and they have lost an eye, Ramyul Jamarat. We find that Hajj itself is a struggle. Many scholars have interpreted that Ashaddul Ibadah is referring to Hajj. Hajj before wasn't like Hajj today. Today you wish to go to Hajj, you sit at home, you can apply for visa online, you can wire the money to the embassy online, you sit in an aeroplane, the cabin crew come, they tell you what would you like to drink. MashaAllah, today the people going to Hajj, they are offered, would you like apple juice, would you like orange juice, and some of them they say, now we like pineapple juice, for example. Back in the day they didn't have such things whatsoever. And this is why when we take a look at our hadith and what Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi alayhi had stated regarding Hajj when he was on his journey to Mecca, people were struggling. So he saw the mu'mineen tired. They were going to perform Hajj, but they were tired. Therefore, Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi alayhi stated to them that there will come a time where the Muslims will be going to Hajj on a flying piece of metal, meaning the aeroplane. They did not understand what Amir al-Mu'mineen were saying. Some people really did not take it seriously. To themselves, they were saying that, yeah, Ali ibn Abi Talib, we can hardly get the donkey walking. Now you want us to believe that there's going to be an aeroplane, that there's going to be metal flying and people are going to go to Hajj on top of it. It's very hard to understand such a hadith. But when we take a look at the surroundings of the entire situation, going to Hajj at that time wasn't something simple. It really wanted someone to pressure himself in order to fulfill this duty towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. MashaAllah, today when you go to Hajj, you find people go to Hajj in order, they spend time in the shopping centers more than they spend time in the actual haram. You don't find them spending so much time in the surroundings of the Kaaba like they spend time in the shopping centers. You find them going there to take pictures usually. However, when we take a look at the practices of the Ma'soomeen and how they performed Hajj, we will find that it is something to cleanse the human being. And cleansing one's soul isn't something simple. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires a lot from the human being before He can accept their duties and their Hajj. We can go to Hajj and we can actually fulfill our duty, but this does not guarantee Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's acceptance. We can offer our salat, but this does not guarantee Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's acceptance. We fulfill our salat, we fulfill our siyam in this holy month of Ramadan. However, can we guarantee Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is accepting it or not? Therefore, we need to take a look at what the real meaning behind ashaddul ibadah, the severest and the hardest type of worship. Therefore, when we take a look at the opinion of Imam al-Baqir salawatullahi alayhi in the severest and the hardest type of worship, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, whatever he states is equal to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants and is equal to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, if Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam tells us that such a thing is the hardest type of worship, this means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considers this act the hardest type of worship. Therefore, we take a look at the opinion of Imam al-Baqir salawatullahi alayhi. In Al-Kafi Al-Sharif, volume 2, page 77, Al-Imam al-Baqir salawatullahi alayhi states, إِنَّ أَشَدَّ الْعِبَادَةِ الْوَرَعِ. Wara' is the hardest and the most severe type of worship. Now, what is wara'? Wara', honestly, in English, there is no translation for it. But we could say piety. We could say piety. However, piety means taqwa in Arabic. But we could use that word because wara' is a higher level of piety. It is higher than piety. Its status is higher than taqwa. Wara' is higher than taqwa, which means piety. But we can use piety. It's okay to use it. It's suitable for that. When we take a look at Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, he states that neither is Salatul Layl the hardest type of worship, and neither is the Nawafil the hardest type of worship, and neither is going to Hajj with all of these difficulties the hardest and the most severest type of worship. Okay, yeah, Imam al-Baqir, what is the hardest type of worship? He states wara', piety, fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This here is the hardest type of worship. They asked a great arif, which I do not wish to mention his name because he has departed from this world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him. The same person I will be narrating a story from later on. This person, they asked him, how did you reach such a high level in taqwa and piety? He said two things. The first is that you do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered you to do and prevent yourself from doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prevented you from. Two simple things, but implementing them in your lives is very difficult. Taking a look at Wasa'il al-Shi'a and the opinion of our Imams, in Wasa'il al-Shi'a, volume 10, page 313, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the blessing of being with the 313. Referring to wara', the hadith of Al-Imam al-Baqir which I just mentioned, referring to that hadith, إِنَّ أَشَدَّ الْعِبَادَةِ الْوَرَعِ, it states, إِنَّهَا أَفْضَلُ الْأَعْمَالِ فِي هَذَا الشَّهْرِ. In the holy month of Ramadan, the best type of worship is wara'. The best type of action is wara', where the human being reaches such a status in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he submits to nothing other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Piety. And we will be giving a few examples of piety after we read one of the hadith which has also been mentioned in Wasa'il al-Shi'a, also volume 10, page 313. After one of the sermons of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa la'natullah ala a'da'ihim, and I will read the hadith for you. It states, قام أمير المؤمنين, Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam stands after one of the sermons which Rasulullah had delivered, and وسأل رسول الله, and he inquired from Rasulullah, ما أفضل الأعمال في هذا الشهر, what is the best type of worship and action in this month of Ramadan? Rasulullah states, يا أبا الحسن أفضل الأعمال في هذا الشهر الورع عن محارم الله. The best type of worship in this month, O Imam Ali, peace be upon you, is fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and having piety from the sins which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had deemed haram for His creations. Now, just to clarify something, here it states that Amir al-Mu'mineen asked Rasulullah. Amir al-Mu'mineen asked Rasulullah not because he does not know. He asked Rasulullah in order to clarify a point for the people who were attending the sermon of Rasulullah at that time. Amir al-Mu'mineen knows this is called in our books, those who read the books which taught in the Hawza, this is called Su'al al-Arif, the question of the knower. He knows the answer, but he asks in order to make a point. Just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He asked Musa, what is in your hand? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that Musa is holding a stick in his hand. And He knows what Musa does with it. But He has said that in order to clarify a point. And I will give you an example. When Musa was asked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Musa, what is in your hand? Musa said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is my stick. I lean on it and I use it for my sheep, and I use it for my sheep and so on. And then he says, I have other things with it. Other things means I defend myself with the stick at times as well, because a stick you can defend yourself with it. But out of respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and out of humbleness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Musa does not say, I use this stick to defend myself. Out of humbleness, he does not say that. And this is one of the tafasir of this ayah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us the akhlaq of Nabiullah Musa. He does not use such terms when speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, although he knows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that he uses his stick to lean on, to help with feeding his sheep and to defend himself. Therefore, this type of a question is called Su'al al-Arif. Amir al-Mu'mineen asked Rasulullah in order to clarify a point for the benefit of the Muslims gathering at that time, not because he does not know. Moving on. Why is it a big deal that piety, what's the secret behind piety being the most severe type of worship, having wara'? The reason behind this, the philosophy behind this, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the human being. The human being was created weak. وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. He was created weak. The human being has a desire within him. In many cases we find that the human being's desire controls him. You see that the human being so big, he falls and he runs after a cigarette this big. You find he has a brain which has taken him to the moon, but he submits in front of a cigarette. This here is the desire of the human being. This shows us the reality of how weak we human beings are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places wara' and how we can reach wara'. He gives us the methodology and the manual, Ahlul Bayt and the Quran, how we can reach wara' and control ourselves in order to satisfy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore we reach paradise. Wara', having piety, clashes with our self-desire. If we wish to control our self-desires and what our self wants, if we wish to control that, then we should fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how we fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through understanding. One cannot just say, I'm going to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, through understanding you can fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Understand who is your creator, who is this person before you that you have the duty to fear, and then you will be able to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with piety and understanding. Can overcome arrogance, self-desire, what the self wants. We take a look, for example, at the story of Iblis, Shaitan, la'natullah alayh. Shaitan, his real name is Harith. Many people believe that, and I have read in some books, that because of the Persian language and the amount of Persian non-Arab, Ajam, anyone who is an Ajmi is a non-Arab, the amount of Ajmi preachers, they have a problem when pronouncing the letter Tha. So instead of Tha, they say Sin. So for example, when they read to the people, the name of Shaitan is Harith, they pronounce it as Haris. And this is why I have seen in many books they state Haris instead of Harith. The real name of Shaitan is Harith. Harith was called Shaitan by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because Shaitan is taken from the word Shatan. Shatan means kicking someone out. When we say Harith was kicked out from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we state that Harith the act of shaitan. He has become a shaitan, someone who is kicked out from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The same with Iblis. Iblis refers to he who ablasa an rahmatillah. Iblis, someone who performed the act of ablas. Ablas means loses hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, Iblis is a statement said to someone who loses hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And shaitan is stated to someone who is kicked out from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does no longer include him. This is the meaning of shaitan and Iblis. His real name is Harith. Harith, who is known as shaitan, worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 16,000 years. Shaitan used to lead the prayer for the malaika. Shaitan was a alim, he was a scholar. Shaitan was someone who feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam states that wara' is the hardest type of worship, the most severe type of worship. Why? Because salat, yes, it does train you. Sawm, fasting, yes, it does train you. But it does not control your desire. Only wara' can control your desire. Shaitan used to fast and shaitan used to learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with understanding after learning about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But his self-desire did not prevent him from disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His self-desires controlled him and made sure that he disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, if shaitan had a sense of wara', sense of piety, he would have overcome his arrogance and he would have worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants him to obey him. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told shaitan, Ya shaitan, bow down to Adam, shaitan said, no, you created me from fire and created Adam from clay, and fire is better than clay, and I will make the same sajda that you want me to make to Adam, I will make the same sajda to you. In some hadith we have for 6,000 years, and I have seen a hadith where it states 10,000 years. Shaitan offered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the same sajda you want me to offer to Adam, I will make that sajda for you for 6,000 to 10,000 years, Ya Allah. But forgive me from bowing down to Adam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, no, I want you to bow down the way I want you to bow down. One time I want you to bow down for me, now I am ordering you to bow down to Adam. But this arrogance which Harith had and possessed within him made him disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I do not believe it was Harith alone, it was shaitan alone. No, when he disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we find that in Surah Al-Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, O Harith, go you and those along you which have disobeyed me. Because a group of shayateen, a group of the companions of Harith who were with him also disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they agreed with shaitan when he disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and bowing to Adam. Shaitan was known as the Tawusul Malaika, the peacock of the angels. This is how beautiful they used to describe shaitan amongst the angels where he used to be around. But however, his arrogance made him the ugliest being out there, made him someone who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has cursed, and someone who has become a rajim, someone kicked out from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, him and those along with him. Now, how can we understand from the lesson of shaitan, this shaitan and the action which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala narrates, which has been performed by shaitan, disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how can we understand this? How can we learn from this? You see, shaitan used to have arrogance. He thought that fire is better than earth, which is not the case. Fire is known to destroy. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He wants to promise the hypocrites and the kuffar severe punishment, He promises them fire. He doesn't promise them anything cold. Fire is used to destroy, whereby clay is used to put together. We build homes with clay. We build cities with clay. We make shelter with clay. The origin of the human being was from clay. Fire is something that destroys. It is something negative. Yes, we can benefit from it for heat, cooking our food. But in reality, fire was made as a negative thing which we can make use of. But this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses fire to punish his enemies, because it's something negative. If the enemy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does something negative, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to react with something negative. Therefore the enemy disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the reaction is fire. Therefore the fire is also negative. It is a negative creation, but the earth is something pak. It is a mutahhir. The earth is considered one of the mutahhirat. The earth purifies what becomes najis. We have in fiqh, and the door for the mutahharat is discussed in the field of jurisprudence. Out of respect to the topic of Ramadan, we shall be sticking to piety. Now, learning from shaitan so that we do not become like shaitan, they said to one of the people in Iran, where did you learn akhlaq from? He said, I learned akhlaq from people who do not have akhlaq. I saw what the people with no akhlaq would do, and I saw people condemning them. Therefore I learned that these actions are condemned actions, and I will not perform these actions, and I performed the opposite to them. This is why people began to praise me. Two things which we can use as wara', piety, we can practice them during this holy month of Ramadan. Whether it be understanding them, believing in them, submitting to them, and whether we actually implement them. The first type which we can benefit from and understand is speaking. Piety in speech. In the holy month of Ramadan, we should have piety in our speech, in everything we say. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises us in Surah Qaf that everything we state, there is nothing that is stated except that there is a raqib and atid. Everything that we state is recorded. Therefore, we need to have wara' and piety in everything we say, in everything we do, in every action we make. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us. This is one, piety in what we state. And there is nothing that brings piety more to our tongues than the recitation of the Holy Quran, the munajat of our ai*imma alayhum as-salam, and dua for ourselves and the believers around us and our families. Let us use this tongue of ours for wara', piety in our speech, in order to bring back two people who have had a dispute between themselves in the holy month of Ramadan. And this action of bringing two people back together, making them friends, or you yourself, if you have a friend or a family member who Silatul Raham applies to, you need to make sure that you reach the satisfaction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by going back and speaking to them, taking into consideration that if you skip 3 days without speaking to your friend or family member, angry, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is honestly angry with this person who does not speak to his friend or family member for more than 3 days after they have had a dispute. Therefore, wara' in speech, piety in speech can be used in the holy month of Ramadan by making dua for people, and at the same time bringing back people who have had dispute together so that they may become friends, inshaAllah. And there is nothing more than the holy month of Ramadan. The holy month of Ramadan is the best time for you to do this. This is one. Two, we can take a look at wara' in our actions and our positions. When there's a mawqif, a position, when someone attacks you, when someone insults you, when someone does something to you, how can you have a piety in the decisions you make and the reactions you put forward, you display? How is it possible? When we take a look at, for example, people who attack Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala. Many people say that our position from Imam Hussein alayhi salam is that we are neither with him, neither are we against him. And these people are cursed people. These people, la'natullah alayhim, there is no such thing as being in Karbala, looking at Aba Abdullah al-Hussein and then saying, I'm neither with him or against him, I'm just standing here. It is not a movie for you to be watching. You need to have taqwa in your position. In your position, whether it be in life or whether you hear of someone backbiting you, do you straight away curse them? Do you straight away pick up the phone and start a fight? Meet me here, I'll fight you. Why'd you speak bad about me, for example? Samahat al-Marji' al-Shirazi, our Marji' al-Taqlid, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him and prolong his life. He narrates the story of in the battle of Karbala, when one of the young orphans, one of the young daughters, the girls, in the mukhayyam, in the tent of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, her clothes had caught fire, and one of the enemy, one of the soldiers from the army of Sham, of Yazid, who had come to attack Aba Abdullah al-Hussein la'natullah upon this army, he came to put out the fire, And this young girl, she said, Anta minna am alayna? Are you with us or are you against us? He said, no, I am neither with you and neither am I against you. And Samahat al-Marja al-Shirazi cursed this person in the middle of his lecture. Because it is not something for you to have an option in, that I am neither with this person, neither am I with this person. We have today people who have a position from Fatima to Zahra and the oppression of Fatima to Zahra. They say we are neither with Fatima to Zahra's oppression and neither are we against Fatima to Zahra's oppression. We are neither with the Wahhabis and neither do we speak bad about the Wahhabis. We are neither with the enemies of Fatima to Zahra and neither are we speaking against the enemies of Fatima to Zahra. And we say la'anatullah upon those people who wish to have a mutual stance against what is happening today. This is corruption. When someone comes and says, I would like to take the oppression of Fatima to Zahra lightly, I do not want to take it very seriously. And so what's so important about Fatima to Zahra being martyred or not? How does this affect me? Of course it affects you. Fatima to Zahra is someone who the entire khalq was created because of her, because of Fatima. This entire world was created because of Fatima. The blessings of Fatima resulted in the creation of this world. She is the hujjah upon our Imams. Fatima to Zahra, if it wasn't for Fatima, there would have been no Quran. If your mother is important to you, therefore we understand that Fatima to Zahra is Abiha. Rasulullah gave his daughter the status of his own mother. How can her death not be important to us? Wara' in research, wara' in writing, piety when you write. Do not pick up a pen and oppose the Sha'ira of Aba Abdullah and Hussein. Do not pick up a pen and oppose the martyrdom of Fatima to Zahra, one of the Sha'ira of Aba Abdullah and Hussein, walking to Karbala. Therefore, piety in each position the human being takes is something very important. Otherwise, we will end up like shaitan. And I will conclude with the story. A few decades ago in Iran, a scholar was asked by one of the tyrant rulers from the Pahlavi family to come and sign. This scholar's grandson is now alive in Dubai. I know him personally. This person was called to come and sign against the killing of another scholar, against something wrong, to come and stamp with his own fingerprint, stamp against something which is haram. And he was asked to, through a threat, blackmail, like, you have to come and sign against such a person. We would like to kill him. The government wanted to kill this person. This scholar lights a candle and burns the tips of his fingers so that he does not have anything to make a fingerprint with. Even if they were to make a fingerprint, it would just look like a smudge. It would not have any trace. And they wanted to come and bring this scholar. This scholar was excused. Why? Because he did not have fingertips. They were all burnt. He made up an excuse that I held onto something hot and it burnt my fingers. And this is how this person went through such a hard night, burning his own fingertips in order that he does not stamp something wrong, does not stamp for something which brings oppression to another Muslim, to another Shia Muslim. Therefore, we find that wara' and piety in the positions and stances of each and every Muslim who believes in the Shahada, it is very important. Therefore, inshallah, we exit this holy month of Ramadan with piety, with wara'. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want us to be people who just fast and recited the salat as a routine like parrots. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to make sure that this salat and this fast has an effect on us, has an effect on our nafs. And the only time our nafs is cleansed and which can welcome the effect of the salat and the siyam is when it has wara'. When wara' is the foundation, when piety is the foundation for our nafs. Therefore, nafs on the foundation of piety, it can welcome every good. And this is how we can be proper Muslims, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is satisfied with. And this is how we receive the confirmation and approval from Amir al-Mu'mineen to enter paradise. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this holy month of Ramadan is a month which we are blessed in, and that we do not leave this month without full rewards. Wa akhira da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-anbiya Muhammad wa ala ali bayti al-tayyibin al-tahirin wa la'natullahi ala adaihim ajma'een.